Alright guys, this is going to be the last part of this tutorial. What we're going to be looking at right now is the lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of Photoshop. Sure. Save me all those entitled things. And we can close out of Crazy Bump. And we're going to take a look at our reference once more. So we want to try and emulate the color and the lighting in this scene. So what do we know about this scene? Well, we know it's being lit primarily by a window. So that means, and it's not direct sunlight, right? If it was direct sunlight, it would be super bright. There'd be really, really high contrasting shadows. There are still high contrasting shadows, but it's not like it's in direct sunlight. This is diffused light. You can see that the shadows, even in this lower quality, are very soft. All the light here is soft. So the light is coming from the outside, but it's being bounced off something first. Or it's the light scattering across the sky, and the sky is lighting the indoors. And we also have a background wall. That looks okay. We have a cool table with a sheet. Just a white table, trying not to stand out. So I'm going to create a box. I forgot interactive creations on. No, thank you. My computer is asking me why are we working so hard? It's like, shut up, we're making art, computer. I'm going to go ahead and combine these two assets by going into polygons and under mesh and combine. Just so we don't have to worry about multiple objects and moving them together, we can just move this single one. Starting to see, I'm just kind of eyeballing at the moment. It's kind of near the edge of the table, so I'm going to definitely move my plane. I'm going to bring that in. And just real quickly, so we have, sorry about that, just real quickly so we have a little bit more to look at than just our watermelon, I'm going to quickly rough in some of the other objects. We have a plate, some fruit, a couple nuts, the rest of the melon. So let's see. No, I wanted one of these. Thank you. Actually, we can test this against the size of this melon. Alright, something like that. I'm just going to keep it as a sphere for now. I'm going to create another sphere and size it down and bring it up. Right view. I'm going to grab my top faces and I'm going to invert them. Pull this down. I'm going to grab these faces, flatten them out, and I have a pretty quick dish. Next thing I want is a couple things in here. Move this back. Remember to save. Alright, we have a couple objects. I'm going to go ahead and make at least 2 more blends. I want to assign this blend to these objects. I'm going to open it up and change the color to something like an apple. Just so that we have some more color information. I'm going to use a second blend. Simulate the rest of my melon. Let's see, one more. Change this to white, representing the table. Eccentricity and specular roll-off low. Reflectivity down to 0, because this is supposed to be cloth. And in fact, make sure your reflectivity is set down pretty low for all these. I definitely don't want anything in my watermelon to reflect. Alright, this is pretty simple so far. Oh, I'll show you kind of a, or maybe I won't, let's see. I'm going to grab a Maya Material X. And I think these have presets. Yes, they do. So I'm going to grab a new Maya Material X. And I'm going to drag and drop that onto my plate. And I'm going to change my preset to copper. And real quick, I'll make like a little chalice. I know this isn't in the reference, but it's just something really quick. Alright. And I have to make sure that I have some normal set. Actually, I'm going to smooth this out and add my edge loops from there. Do some high-res stuff. So edge loop. There. There. Maybe one there. There, and I have a really quick cup shape thing. In fact, I'm going to duplicate it. Alright, so I have a really simple scene. I didn't spend much time making this look more than just randomly set up. Take your time when you're creating your scene to try and fabricate an interesting looking object, or scene rather. Spend a little bit more time. You know what? This cup has fallen. Okay. So I have another DGS material. I'm going to assign this to my 2 cups. I'm going to double click on this. And I'm going to come under the presets, and this time I want to set something like chrome. Cool. And I know they don't look like much right now, but that will change in a moment. Alright, I want to create a wall as my background. Just a random plane. I'm going to make sure, actually just make this 1 by 1. All right. And maybe another day I'll show you guys how to do some really cool stuff like, oh, we'll do something like cloth simulation. That'd be kind of cool. All right. Actually, that had an interesting look to it. All right. So I'm kind of just setting up scene in a way where I think it looks kind of interesting from a few angles. That's good. I'm gonna save real quick because I'm gonna start putting in lights, and we all know how troublesome that can be. So let's give it a shot. Let's be daring. No, you have to do this. It's the worst part. So I'm gonna start off by creating an area light. And like I was saying in class, area lights are dependent on their shape. So if I turn on lighting and I increase my intensity to something I can actually see, if I actually change the size of this light, it's changing the amount of area of light which is being given off, which changes the intensity. So because we know this is a window and light is pouring in, I'd say it's probably a pretty small window because it's from back in the day, and generally they didn't install large windows in houses and buildings because it was very costly to heat. Not costly, it's just hard. So based on my reference image, I'm going to say it's probably 6 feet off the ground, maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground, and maybe 6 or so feet back. And this is just pure guess. So assuming this is a table, and I'm going to go into my top view. And I'm actually going to make this flush with this wall. And we start to get a picture of what our scene's going to look like. It's probably still too bright for us, and we definitely want to change the color to something like a day, which is usually more like a very, very lightish amber. And if this was in fact not the sun, which I don't think it is, this is probably being bounced. So it's actually less. You have to assume what time of day it is. So this is all getting really hard. But the white light bouncing off this tablecloth tells me that it's probably in the middle of the day and the sun is high in the sky, which means it's a very whitish light. All right, so the next thing we have to do is make sure that we have shadows being casted. And the way we do that is come under the shadows bar, and we need to scroll down, and I'm going to increase my shadow rays to 10, and I'm going to do that just for this preliminary test. That'll probably end up being increased quite a bit. All right, so because I have pretty advanced materials assigned to these objects, I know that it's going to require a lot of rendering. So now that we have shadows and a light set up, we can start testing. And first we have to make sure that we're set to mental ray. And then I'm going to come under the common tab. And right now I'm set to HD 540. I don't even know what that is. But I'm going to go to 640 by 480. And that's just a common small size that I use. It's easy to render for the computer, and once you know you have a really cool setup, you can boost it to 720p and see what that's looking like, and then do your much higher res versions. So passes we don't need to worry about. Passes are set up so that you can do compositing in real time. Well, not real time, but you can do compositing within Maya, and that means that you do a render pass and you render just the color, and then you do another render pass and you render the lighting, and then you do another one and you render effects like smoke and stuff like that. Really cool stuff that you probably won't get into anytime soon, but you might want to look into on your own time. Quality, I'm going to set to default. Indirect lighting. We have to make sure that global illumination and final gather are turned on. Like I was saying in class, global illumination and final gather work together to help simulate bouncing light and giving us more defined lighting and better shadows actually as well. So we have that set up. I'm going to hit the IPR clapboard, and that's going to show us what we're looking at in our render. I can probably zoom in a bit and hit IPR again. That looks pretty good. And change my view slightly. Okay. So I think this is going to have a good render. I'm going to go ahead and try rendering. I have no idea if my light is going to be bright enough. But it's actually coming in. Very cool. You can see that in the image there's actually still quite a bit of reflection going on with our other objects. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to change the material so that there's no reflected AV and no specular. And same with this material. No reflectivity and very, very low specular. And we'll try again. A little bit more like it. So you can see that everything functions properly. I can see material on my watermelon looking really good. I see my DGS materials are functioning correctly. And this is all really cool. What is this? Aperture? No way. That's really cool. So you can actually change the lighting, the aperture of your simulated camera in real time, which is really, really cool. Sorry, I'm like geeking out about it. All right, so let's take a look further at global illumination. So I'm going to come into my lighting, and I'm going to create a new point light. All right. And what I'm going to do is intentionally move this very close to this green object. And intensity at 1, that seems okay. I'm going to make sure that my shadows are turned on. I'm actually not too concerned about this one, so I'm going to set it to a 5. And I'm going to move in real close so I can see some bounce light going on. So in this case, we're not actually seeing a whole lot, and I think it might be the nature of point lights in general. So I'm going to create instead, I'm going to do a spotlight. That should work nicely. So I'm going to change my spotlight. I'm going to move over here and increase the intensity greatly. And in fact, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to turn this one off. by just turning the intensity to 0. So let's take a look again in our render, see what happens. Really interesting looking light. And what I mean by that is that spotlight is super bright and it's hitting this green ball. And you can actually see down here, this isn't white color, this is green. This means that light is bouncing off of this surface and being cast here as green. If this light, if this material had a much brighter green, you'd be able to see a lot more. Oh, this is so cool. Oh, and what you can see back here is actually the little samples of what global illumination is doing. And they made some very cool stuff. So let's put our melon in the spotlight. This is way too bright. Well, let's see what kind of render we get. Bam. It certainly still looks computer generated. It's not fooling me into thinking that this is real, and that's just because we didn't spend, if I was going to make this an absolutely real looking asset, I would have spent maybe 5 times as long on it in every aspect, texturing and modeling, of course. So if you want to do some dramatic lighting, you can set up a light right above. I don't have many rays set up, so let me boost that up some. And we can take a look at the difference in between the shadows in this render. Everything is evenly lit. The shadows are really harsh and just not very impressive. And the funny thing is, the only difference between this light and the other one is how soft it is. So if I set this down to 0, and I set this one back up to what it was, I think it was around 3, and we render that again. Right away you can see, and I think this looks pretty cool. Let's see if we can get some more of our watermelon in here. Yeah, very cool. So something that you can do to help kind of improve the visual interest of a scene is by using a little trickery and maybe some fake lighting. And we can do that by creating a new light. And I'm going to create another area light. I'm going to bring that back. And I'm going to consider this the light bouncing off the wall. So I'm going to increase its size greatly. And I can even do it like this. And I'm going to pull the intensity way down. Maybe a 0.1 to start. And then I'm going to change the lighting to like a brown, similar to something like wood. And I want to make sure that I actually don't use, well, you know what? We'll try shadows and see if we get some ugly looking shadows or not. So no, we're not getting weird shadows. We're definitely getting a lot more interesting looking lighting by having a fill light. So just because I know you guys are probably curious, what would it look like if I did a render like this? Props point of view. You definitely spend a lot more time playing around with the materials. If I take a look at this one, I might increase the eccentricity. Let me grab it in here so I can see it update. So just make it a little bit more shiny. And let's change this to and now I'm just gonna do an experiment with just kind of faking all sorts of lighting. So I'm gonna bring this to like a really cool blue, and I'm gonna make this light a very warm orange. Maybe bump this up to like a 0.3. And actually, I'm gonna back this wall up. Actually, I'll use my spotlight. I'll back this up first. Bring my spotlight over, bring its intensity up. And this is going to act as my backlight. Cone angle, let's increase that. And I'm going to change the intensity a little bit. There, so in this case, this light has no real world source. I mean, you would expect a light to be literally rendered in the back. So this will look slightly fake. One way that you can get around that is by pulling it off of your renders, the place where you're going to render. But let's just see what it looks like, kind of where it is. Yeah, it's kind of misbehaving. And it looks like we need to change this back down to 0.2. Alright, so I think we've done some experimenting now. A lot of time I spent to get the right look. I'm going to try one more experiment. I'm going to get rid of that light. I'm going to move in this wall, bring it up a little bit, and I just duplicated it. Actually, simpler. I'm just going to extrude this edge and extrude this edge. So now that we have more bounce lighting coming around the whole scene, if I just stand back and do a render real quick, you'll get more of an idea of what. So it looks like it's bleeding very heavily right there. One way to fix that is to just, raise the roof. And I'm going to do another render. Actually, I'm going to make sure that this isn't as orange as it is. It's very, very orange at the moment. I'm going to do a quick render. It looks like the brightness is set too high. And it looks like my watermelon's not as shiny as I want it to be. So what I'm trying to do is set up the last few parameters before I do my high quality render. And I know you guys are probably bored to tears at this point. I will try Slimy once more. Excuse me. Alright, I'm dying. Okay, I think I'm just going to be the last quality. No, it's not. This balloon is still freaking me out. And this is where a lot of the beauty comes in your work, is tweaking something, doing a render, tweaking something, doing a render. This is where cool. So say I really like this. There would probably be more that I do, but I'm going to say that I like this. So I'm going to go into my render settings and I'm going to kind of double everything. Accuracy, 200, point interpolation. Yes, I need to rebuild my final gather map every time. Caustics we don't need to worry about. Oh, maybe before we end real quick, make a new Maya material, and I'm gonna create like a random. This is just kind of a bonus. This random ball. I'm gonna go into my DGS, my new DGS material. First I'll sign it. And I'm going to set the preset to glass physical replace. And you definitely play around with these presets. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. So now I'm going to go into my render settings, crank stuff up. I'm going to set the quality to as high as it goes. And I'm gonna hit the 4K square. I'm really gonna go all out. This is gonna take probably an hour or two. I'm definitely not gonna make you watch this one, but I'm just gonna set it up and show you what I do. You could also set up a new camera. So really quick, I'm gonna hold down space and right click and do a new camera. Not sure where it decided to place that camera, but if you go into perspective, let me find my camera. I guess it didn't make a new camera. Perspective 2. Okay, if you go through panels, perspective, and go through perspective 2, you can do some cool stuff like change the focal length and angle of view. I'm not even sure what that does. And if you've ever done photography before, these are all kind of simulated stuff that you'd see in the actual industry. Depth of field is a cool one. The focal distance is probably something like 500 actually. 5,000? It doesn't seem to like my focal distance options. Anyways, play around with this stuff when you can. It can add a lot of cool effects to your project. I recommend just kind of playing around with them as much as you can. So once you have everything set up, you have your camera, you make sure your settings are cranked through the roof. I'm going to delete those so I don't get all messed up. And I'm going to render. And I'm going to cut the video off there because I don't want you guys to wait so long. But that's it. I hope you guys have a lot of success doing this. Certainly email me, call me, text me, whatever, if you're having any problems, because I'm sure that there's some questions that you've had that you've been afraid of asking, and you don't have to feel afraid of asking a question. When I was going through school, I spent a lot of time sitting down and emailing Matt Board to ask him a million questions. And it's how I advanced my skills and how I was able to learn as quickly as possible. So don't forget to ask me questions if you got them. All right, guys, good luck on your project. I will talk to you later.